Aloha! So today, as I promised before, we're going to be making musubi. Just because the last batch I made didn't do from start to finish, and the rice was a little old, so it wasn't really doing it justice. So here in Hawaii, musubi is king. We do have quite a few varieties. You can find them lots of different places. You'll find them in the 7-Eleven. You'll find them all over the different supermarkets. You know, it's a quick and fast, easy thing to grab and run with you. You know, incorporates some of the Japanese culture, uses the sushi, rice, and nori, but also, you know, the different flavors, the Portuguese flavors and whatnot inside, as well as most of the time they'll have a spam that goes in there. We'll try a couple different types. I've got some teriyaki chicken that we'll do up, some chicken thighs that'll be marinated in teriyaki sauce. We'll cook those off, and then we'll do some spam, and then also I've got some char siu pork belly. We'll try that one as well. So we get the 3 different items. First off, to start with, you gotta have your rice. So the rice I'm using here, this is short grain white rice, specifically sushi rice. Usually you'll find it'll either be Japanese rice or calrose rice. Calrose is the California equivalent of the short grain rice, kind of developed in California for sushi. And what I usually do is I always use my rice cooker. You know, it's simple, it's easy. If you don't have a rice cooker, you tend to do it in a pot. But with this one, short and simple, you know, measure out a cup here. It's got a measuring on the side, easy enough to use. You know, a lot of different people say, hey, you got to make sushi rice differently than that. You can do it however you want. This is just how I do it for cooking in my home. Simple and easy. You know, I'm not going super professional with it. And then once you get it measured out, I did 2 cups here. You always want to wash your rice. No matter how it looks when it's coming out of the package, no matter how fancy the package is, the place where they store the rice in these countries that are coming from here, they're not exactly clean. So it's always good to rinse off the rice to make sure you get any dust or other particles on there. What I do is I'll fill it up with water, completely cover the rice, you know, get it good and submerged. And if you can see that at all, you'll get the water will turn cloudy the first time. I stir it up a little bit, pour it off, and then with sushi rice, I always repeat it until the water is not cloudy anymore. That might be going a little too far for some people. I mean, you don't have to go that far, but the way I use it, I think it's always a good idea. Like I said, you never know what's been on the rice, and it's easy enough. I always do 2-3 times. Now you can also do this in a colander if you want. If you have a colander that's got fine enough hole, or a sieve or something like that, you can just rinse the grains off in there until the water comes out clear. But like I said, I like to use the easiest way possible at home. And then once we're done rinsing it, I put 2 cups of rice in there, so I just fill it up just about to the, well, right at the 2 mark. Put it in, make sure we're plugged in, which we're not. And there we go. Turn it on, it should start cooking right away. Once you got it cooking, we'll let it cook all the way through. It'll flip. I'll unplug it, and then I'll wrap the top in a towel. That'll make sure that it'll keep circulating the liquid in there, but anything that comes to the top, it won't drip back down onto the rice, make the top of the rice wet. Leave that for a good few minutes. Then we're going to flip that into a bowl, add our sushi rice, and mix it till it's cool. I'll show you that next step in a minute. All right, so we finished our rice. It's done cooking for now. Once the rice cooker turned off, I opened it up just real quick, put one of my kitchen towels on there, and you just got to make sure that the kitchen towel's good and clean. When you put it on there, it'll absorb some of the steam as it comes up and prevent it from dripping down water on the top there. It'll also absorb a little bit of liquid there that we're trying to get out of there for the sushi rice. So once we've let that set for a little while, We're going to go ahead, take our sushi rice out, and you want to get it into a large container, a good bit larger than the rice, because you got to spread it out so it'll cool nice and even. So while we're doing that, having it cool down, this is when you're going to season it with your vinegar. Now, most sushi professionals, they'll make their own vinegar. They'll get the rice vinegar, they'll cook it with some sugar and a little bit of the nori as well, maybe even a little salt to season it if they want to. Personally, I just go buy the already pre-seasoned rice vinegar. Just make sure you don't get it too sweet. There is such a thing as mirin sweet vinegar. That's used for other things. This is just rice vinegar that's been seasoned for sushi. This one's Kinkaman. I've also got Nakano here. You know, two different brands. They both work equally well. You just got to make sure that you're adding the vinegar to the rice while it's still hot, and then you're going to turn it so it starts to cool down, as well as coats all the rice with the vinegar. Now, it'll seem a little wet to begin with, and it'll absorb. It'll get sticky. One of the main things you're doing with this is, since we're going to be keeping the rice warm for an extended period of time, this actually ups the acidity in there, makes it a lot less easy for the bacteria to get in there, and makes the rice taste a lot better. Now, when you're mixing this, I just kind of eyeball it. You taste it every once in a while to make sure that you've got the right amount of vinegar in there. It should be, you know, I should make good season without being too harsh. And once you get it in there, you get it all coated around. You'll spread it out real thin, and you want to just be very gentle. You want to break up the rice as little as possible. You cut some grooves in there, and you needn't fan it off. Now you can fan it off, you know, with your towel, with your spoon here. And this is just a basic rice spoon. It's kind of non-stick, so the rice doesn't stick too bad to it because it does get very sticky. And we'll just let that cool. And actually, we'll leave that off to the side for now while we're letting that cool. You want to let that cool down to room temperature before you start using it. Every once in a while, you'll just turn it just to make sure it keeps cooling down. Now, while we're waiting for that to cool down, our next step for the Spam Musubi is going to be our ingredients that we're putting inside. So, I've got 3 ingredients here. Our traditional Spam, now the one we're using today is a Spam Light. It's just got a lot less sodium to it. It's a little bit less fat and less calories. Trying to watch our weight a little bit. But contrary to that, also we've got char siu pork belly here, and some teriyaki glazed chicken thighs. So the chicken thighs are just the frozen chicken thighs from Costco. I soak them in a teriyaki glaze probably about 2-3 hours beforehand, after they're thawed out, and then I just throw them in the oven probably about 12 to 18 minutes at about 350 to 375, and that's on a convection oven. Probably go up to about 20 minutes if you're doing a conventional oven. The pork belly, I brine that probably overnight in the char siu seasoning. Then I take that, I vacuum seal it and sous vide cook it, I believe somewhere around 156 for about 24 hours. After that, let it cool down, take it out of the bag, and we slice it. And here we're going to pan fry it, as well as the Spam. We're going to pan fry the Spam as well. The chicken thighs, as soon as that's cooked, you can bring them out, just cut them to shape for your musubi, which we'll be doing that in a second. And then also, we're going to be making the musubi, wrapping it in nori with the teriyaki glaze, as well as our filling here. Alright, so our rice is still cooling down now, but it's just about there. So once you got it down to room temperature, you can leave it in the bowl while you get everything else set up. Quick tip is to take that same towel, throw it over top, and that way the rice won't dry out while it's still sitting there nice and warm. Now for our fillings here, I've got our Spam as well as our pork belly. They're both cooking here. And I keep a nice non-stick pan. I've got the induction burner in the house, so Makes it real nice and easy. Non-stick pan with the Spam and the pork belly. You want to get a good sear on each side. Cook it just about, well, pork belly and the Spam are already cooked all the way through, but you want to get a nice crust on the outside. Once you've got that, right at the finish, we're going to throw in some of our teriyaki glaze once again. And that'll get all that flavor right into that pork belly, into that Spam. Now the chicken we already cooked in the oven with the teriyaki glaze, so that's all set. And you're doing this now, because now it'll be warm. Then you can let it cool down for a couple minutes before you go and add it to your sushi rice and make your musubi. That way it'll be easier for you to handle, but it'll still be warm, flavorful, and delicious with that nice teriyaki. So when we add it in there, we can reduce the teriyaki glaze a little bit, but you don't want too much. If it gets too hot, it'll actually burn and give you a bitter taste. Or even if it doesn't burn, it'll reduce down and it'll get really salty. That plus the Spam there might be a little bit too much to handle. So with this glaze here, I've got it reduced down. I'm actually just going to pour it right in the Spam can there, and we'll save that for when we're making the musubi. That way we can glaze the rice with it, have a nice teriyaki flavor in there without it being too thin and just soaking all the way through. Alright, so now we got everything together. I'll show you my little setup and how I do it, putting the musubi together. There's a couple different steps to it, and it's really quite easy, but I'll show you what just makes it really easy in this house. I got a cutting board here. It's a clean cutting board, but I always like to put down plastic, especially when I'm working with the sushi rice. Sushi rice is going to get really sticky. It's easier just to throw away a little piece of plastic wrap than trying to clean all the sticky rice off the board and out of the sink and everything else. We'll still get some sticky rice around, but it'll be a little bit less this way. We've got the musubi maker. Find these here at Walmart, stores, wherever. You can probably find it in an Asian market. You won't be able to read the packaging. You won't be able to figure it out unless you know what it is. So now you know what it is. Easy enough to use and to put together. Also, you can find them on Amazon. We've got our nori wrappers here. Now, these ones just comes packed roasted seaweed. I always take them, you know, if you get it fresh out of the package, usually it's pretty good, but it usually takes us a little while to use these. So we take these, throw them in the oven for just a few seconds in the convection oven to crisp back up again. You want a nice crisp nori seaweed, otherwise it gets kind of chewy and the flavor isn't so great. But once you crisp it up, and you can actually hear it's kind of crunchy, I always just take them, break them in half, or you know what, you can even either just tear them, or you can use a knife to get a nice crisp clean edge. But this usually works pretty good. I've got a bowl here. It's got some water in it, a little rice vinegar. I use that for handling the rice. As long as you keep your hands wet, it doesn't stick too bad. We've got all of our fillings here. So we've got our chicken, our Spam, and our pork belly. We've got a little bit of glaze left over still. It's starting to thicken up real good, which is nice. That means it'll stick to the rice really well. And then also, something I found out, really great with sushi rice, a lot of rice dishes, this is called furikake. So here it comes in like 8, 10, 15 different flavors. It's just called like a rice seasoning. It's actually, here, let me see if I can hold it up to the camera easy enough. It's sesame seeds and little flakes of nori and some seasoning in there. You can get this wasabi flavor, you get this kimchi flavor. There's like 8, 10, 15 different flavors you can get in. This is just the basic one, but it really brings out a lot of flavor in your rice. It goes really well with it, especially if you like the nori. Me, I'm kind of heads or tails with the nori. It's nice when it's toasted and crunchy. If it gets soggy, it kind of puts me off a little bit, just because it's got that seaweed taste, but it is really good for you though. So what I always do is I put it down on the cutting board, always shiny side up, and that's towards the rice. That could be completely wrong, but that's always the way I do it. Also, when I put it on it, have it overhang the mold a little bit here, just so I have something to roll on. Get my hands a little wet, then we'll grab some of the rice. So usually for this mold, it ends up being about 2/3 of a cup of rice. So Throw it in there. Tamp it down a little bit with our hands. Now you could do it several different ways. You can have the rice down at the bottom, you're filling, and then rice at top, and then wrap it. You can have rice all the way up, then you're topping, then wrap it. And you don't even have to use this much nori if you don't want to. You could use just a little sliver just to kind of tie it together. It's all up to you. There's many different ways that they do it. But the way I like to do it is pretty much half at the bottom. Then I'll add in a bit of the furikake. And then whatever my filling is. So this one, we're going to go ahead. I'm going to take the pork belly. One of my favorites, but super fatty. And then a little bit of the glaze there. Just a bit to make it exciting, right? And then rice on top. So this mold, you can fill it all the way up to the top. I find that's a little hard to eat. So I usually fill it about 2/3 full. Got a handy dandy little plunger here. You want to pack it all down real good so it sticks together. And then finally you use it at the end, push it out. Now once we've done that, my hands are still a little wet so they're good. Wrap around the nori. There we go. And since it's nice and dry, that little bit of wet makes it stick. Absolutely beautiful there. You know, that's just a little bit of pork belly in there with our seasoning, lots of rice, and then our nori holding it together. We'll let it sit there for just a minute before we cut it. That way it'll soak into the nori. So while we're waiting for that one, once again, shiny side up. Get your hands wet. Some rice down there at the bottom. And you know what? We'll fill this most of the way up and we'll put the chicken towards the top. So for this one, because the chicken's going to be on the top there, I'll put the rice first. A touch of the glaze there. And then our furikake right on top there. Once we have that together like that, I'm just going to put the chicken, slide it in here right on top. And I cut these chicken thighs to be about the right size here. You can always cut like 2 or 3 pieces if your pieces are regular. That's fine too. Slide it on out. And since there's still a good bit of moisture on that chicken, that nori will wrap right on around for you. So, you have this little seam here. Always put that seam down so everything will rest on it and then it'll soak through. One left to go. And for this one, you know what? Let's see, we'll make it look a little fancier here. See, my hands are all wet and everything's sticking to it, but there we go. We'll just do a half a sheet of nori on this one. Let's see how well we do. So, put our rice down. Make sure to get hands nice and wet. There we go. Pack it a little bit there. A little bit of furikake. A nice piece of Spam. A little bit more glaze on top of the Spam. And then we've got a second bit of rice. Now this one is going to come out looking a little different. And you know what, if we want, touch more furikake on top. Wrap this up there. And alright. Oh, isn't that beautiful? So here we have our 3 musubi. So, traditionally, just pick it up and eat it just like that. If you want it to look fancy, cut it kind of like traditional sushi. Make sure you get your knife wet. Be very careful when you do this. And then each time you cut, make sure you get it wet. You can use a paper towel for this, make it a little bit easier on yourself. There we go. You want to make sure you got a sharp knife whenever you're cutting, otherwise you'll just drag the nori straight through. And there we go. Wasn't that a beautiful pork belly spam musubi? Well, actually that's just a pork belly musubi. Here's our spam musubi. And we'll give you a look. All right. See, that's why you got to get it good and wet. Water actually acts as a nice lubricant to get through. All right, and there's our chicken. Whoop. Run away for a cocky, but that's all right. And there we go. So that's our musubi. Pretty much you can find these just about anywhere in Hawaii, any grocery store, stuff like that. There's actually food trucks dedicated specifically for the musubi. You can get things like pulled pork and shredded chicken, stuff like that. All kind of wonderful stuff you can find in these. Great to grab and go. Lots of nice, you got a nice warm sushi rice, you know, held together really well with the nori. Nice bite of meat on the inside. You know, almost beats a sandwich or a burrito. All right, thank you everybody. Mahalo for watching. Love y'all. Aloha, and we'll see you next time.